Welcome back, creators. It is now 2025 and there is a lot to reflect on. We just had one of the best years for Sonic and specifically for Shadow, and this movie was the highlight of, I think, all of it. This is a monumental moment for the character and for the franchise. To see a movie do this well and be received this well on top of a game that just released be received well as well. A lot of wells. 2024 kind of just felt like a dream. It didn't even feel real because everything was just going so well. And here we are. And so, what do I think of this movie? So this is where there's a few things I wanted to point out. If you don't already know, like, my stance on the first two films, it's that I like them, and I like them for what they are, and I accept the ways that they're different. Those aspects of them I've already accepted at this point. I understand this is a different universe. Things are going to be very different. I'm not expecting a direct adaptation of any plot line, especially the first two being a lot more, like, ambiguous as to what stories they're pulling from. It's kind of like Sonic 1 through 3, and they just kind of pull, and Knuckles, and they just sort of pull from those stories for the first two films, but in this one, they're really pulling from Adventure 2. That's a big deal. So, in terms of, like, the campiness and, like, you know, some of the more, like, cringy human moments, like, those are still kind of sprinkled throughout. They're not as bad as the past two films. Like, there's no wedding scene in this movie, but I just thought a lot of the stuff with the humans was a little janky, and the writing was a little stiff, and not too much of it was entertaining. But as soon as all the other characters were on screen, I was there for it. And you know, I shouldn't even say the humans are boring, because Jim Carrey is the most entertaining character, I think, in this movie. And I loved his performance as Eggman in this movie. I think exploring the depressed side, which, if you guys don't know, like, after the events of Sonic 3, between Sonic 3 and Sonic Mania, basically, it was said that Eggman became depressed. And so, like, building on that with Sonic 3 having Eggman be depressed after his previous defeat, I think is perfect. I think it's a great place to start him in this story, and they actually give him a lot to do, and they do develop his character, which I do appreciate. It's not like he just shows up and then gets tricked and then, you know, just is fighting for world domination with his grandfather, which is initially what I thought it was going to be, or something like that. But no, they actually are faithful to SA2 in the sense that Eggman realizes how crazy his grandfather was, and he's like, well, we can't kill everyone. And I love that line, and I love that scene because of just how genuine the reaction was. Like, that is what Eggman would say. Even the video game Eggman, he doesn't want to destroy the entire planet till there's, like, nothing left, you know? He doesn't want to wipe out humanity. He's never been that type of villain. But to see his grandfather so messed up from the loss of Maria, and only having Shadow to be able to relate to that pain, or at least, like, someone who was really there to experience the event. Obviously, other people in the world can relate to losing someone, but I think Gerald probably was already experiencing some rising tension with Gunn before all that stuff went down, you know, before they tried to cancel his project. But anyway, getting out of the depths of the lore, off-screen lore, I really do appreciate that the movie was able to take itself more seriously and in a balanced way that didn't make it feel forced or anything. This was a really good tone. It was allowing for, you know, their usual banter and jokes and, you know, sort of typical James Marsden doing his thing. You know, it could fit all those things in there, but it was a little more tame this time around, and there was a lot more serious moments. But because of that, like, because they want to keep that camp from those two first movies, I think this movie had the highest contrast. And what I mean by that is, like, the contrast of, like, the movie being really dark and serious and really lighthearted and fun. This is the highest contrast. And in some ways, Sonic stories kind of are that. You know, there is a lot of really funny moments and really serious moments. You could even say the same about Marvel movies in general. It works. Like, that's a formula. But I just noticed that it was a little bit jarring in this one, at least on my first watch. I haven't watched it a second time. I've only seen clips online after watching it the first time. So it's pretty fresh on my mind, but, like, I think a second viewing would give me, like, more of a solid opinion. But from my brief initial thoughts of everything I've seen, processing, you know, that story and all these aspects of the characters and how they handled this contrast of tone, I'd say they handled it the best they could. You know, meeting the gun commander at a Chow Garden cafe was, like, I was trying so hard not to laugh in the theater when he comes out of nowhere and he's like, Sonic, there's something important I need, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It's just, he sounded exactly like he did from the GameCube. I don't know why that scene cracked me up. There's a lot of unintentional things. It must be intentional. I hope it's intentional. If it is, then oh my god, like they knew exactly what they were doing. It's playing with the silliness of all of it while also maintaining like that serious tone in the backdrop. You know, it doesn't ever fully let it go. It's almost like this movie has a mandate to fit those jokes in there, and then they can go back to telling the story they really want to tell. You know, it's kind of like, I can't tell if these moments are like hiccups for the film or if they actually propel the film and make it a better film. I don't know. I just think that some of the jokes are gimmicky and not really organic. I think Sonic can be very funny because all the characters have different powers. Like, I mean, imagine the types of scenes you can do just with like physical comedy. Like, there's a lot you can do there. And I feel like they don't lean into making something more organically funny because like the situation they're in is funny, or because Knuckles' like obliviousness or gullibleness is funny, or like, you know, they don't lean into the characters' characteristics to make it funny. They're just like, haha, Detective Pikachu. And it's like, it's fine, I get it, you know what I mean? Like pop culture, I get it, pop culture, you know, that's gonna be in big budget films. They're trying to relate to a mass wide audience with their humor, but it's like, that's just not what's funny. Even in like the newer generations that are younger than me, that's not even funny to them, and I don't even understand most of their humor. So it's kind of like some of these jokes, I'm like, I don't know like who that's for. That's like for someone from 2018. Like the Green Lantern joke was like such a Deadpool joke, it did not need to be in there. And so I'm like kind of disappointed like their skill at being able to tell a joke that feels organic and doesn't feel like fourth wall breaking, talking about Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern. Like, it's just stupid. Like, say something funny that relates to what's going on, at least in the environment of the scene, let alone with the characters, right? But that's just me. Aside from how they handled that contrast and how they handled the humor, now let's get into the juice. Shadow the Hedgehog is the best part of this film, along with Jim Carrey's Ivor Robotnik and Gerald Robotnik. Those three characters are like the best in this film. Knuckles was really great too, and so was Sonic and Tails and everyone, but like that was the highlight for me this film. And I didn't exactly go in with like super high expectations, but I did go in expecting a good time, you know, and so when it opened with Shadow, I was very pleased, and he's like dreaming, he's reliving some memory, and then Eggman starts to hack into the system, and then Shadow breaks through the pod and frees himself. That scene was very, very well done. It was really cool to see Prison Island and sort of what it looks like. It was very cool, looked like something out of Metal Gear, especially with like the rain and all of that. It was a very cool opening, it really set the tone for the rest of the film. I don't want to go through the movie frame by frame, but just wanted to comment on that opening being so good. I was actually very pleased to see that a lot of the stuff we saw in the trailers was from like the first part of the film, like the first act, you know, where they're tasked by Gunn to go stop Shadow. It very much feels like that, but it is such a contrast to the original Sonic Adventure 2 plot, which is that Gunn mistakes Sonic for Shadow and kidnaps him. And here they're going to him specifically for help, which I think makes more sense now that I think about it. Like, Gunn should be able to tell the difference between Sonic and Shadow. I mean, one of them should be on ice in their Prison Island base, so if he's not there, then that's a problem. But it's just really interesting that they didn't choose to do that whole plot line where they mistake Sonic for Shadow and vice versa. So the way they changed Shadow's story, that he's just this creature that's in this little comet, kind of hinting that he is from the Black Comet, but maybe like he was some creation that was given to Gerald instead of Gerald creating him. This is the one that like I'm like, this is an unnecessary change in my opinion. So I don't know if I was a huge fan of that. I was very taken back by it, and that detail of the story kind of set me back a little bit when I was in the theater. I was just like, what? Like, really? What? Like, what? Okay, I guess. He's from the inside of a comet and he just naturally looks that way. And he's not some artificial creature that was grown in a lab. He's just something that Gerald found and discovered. So I don't know what they're planning on doing with that. Like, what are the implications of that and how that could lead into a potential Shadow movie where we see like an alien invasion of Black Doom, maybe coming back to get Shadow, to capture him or to convince him to come home or whatever. Like, I don't know what they're gonna want to do for a Shadow solo movie, but obviously it's happening. I don't even think we need to have this conversation. If the fourth movie is gonna focus on Amy and Metal Sonic and Shadow just got introduced, we have to do the Shadow the Hedgehog storyline eventually, you know, and maybe they're saving that for like a Thanos kind of endgame thing. Like that's what they said they wanted to do, is just make their little universe of Sonic movies that build up to an Avengers level event. That could be an Avengers level event, an alien invasion, you know, and it relates to Shadow, you know, but it's almost too Shadow focused that I'm like, might as well just let him have his own film. But anyway, I'm getting so off track. This movie universe is exciting, but yeah, some of the changes were just bizarre, but I think it's a hint at what we could see in the future. The stuff with Maria was very beautiful, very emotional. We didn't get to see like as much as I would have liked. I actually think that Dark Beginnings did a better job of introducing us to Maria and telling us what, you know, is going on with her and kind of giving us a gist of like what her relationship is with Shadow. And she's sort of like the one person on the arc that's not afraid of him, that sees the good in him and takes care of him. They become like siblings, and it's very cute and wholesome. And they did capture that, but like they didn't really show us that. It's sort of implied, or it's said, and we get flashbacks, and they're very, very brief. There was one moment with Maria that was really beautiful, like really well written, is very emotional and very well done. But overall, like I wanted to see more backstory of her interacting with Gerald and like all three of them together and what their dynamic was. Like that is what irks me, is that we got that in Shadow Generations, but we didn't get it in the movie. And I'm sure there must be like an extended cut, and I'm sick and tired of extended cuts and when it comes to movies and stuff, but hear me out. I feel like a few more scenes would have really made this movie better. Especially looking back on it now, I'm like, yeah, there's a couple of scenes that I would have added, and it would have made the movie longer, but I think it would have been better. Because the pacing of this movie, to me, while it is good, it is a little off. Things very quickly, suddenly ramp up. I think it just would have been better to start the film with Shadow's origin story completely. No interruptions, we just see how Gerald found him, and then him and Maria, like, you know, spending time together, and then all three of them spending time together in the lab, like doing tests with Shadow, and now I'm realizing I basically wanted what the fan film did, and I hate to bring up that when we're talking about the actual movie. I was right in a way with my initial concern that they would not spend as much time on that aspect of the story, which to me is the most interesting. And like the fact that they didn't take that opportunity where Shadow's in the capsule to like zoom into his mind and see what he's actually viewing. But like I know we did get that for a glimpse, but what I mean is like for an entire scene, we get to see the entire backstory while he's in the tank. So then when we come out from that story, then he breaks out, and then you feel that drive. You're like, oh my god, he loved her, like they had like a family bond, and then they all got separated because of Gunn, and you know, it like kind of makes you hate Gunn because you're seeing everything from their perspective, and you get to see how much they loved each other. So then right when she is about to die, then Shadow wakes up and breaks through the pod. Would have been so much better. And then you already have all the context, and the audience is already sort of like kind of rooting for Shadow until they realize what he's actually planning, right? And then you're sort of like, but I get it, but I get it. But I didn't get it. And it's not because I don't know the story, because everybody knows the story. It's how they failed, in my opinion, to hit that home like earlier in the film so that you feel that drive. And so I will say the movie is not bad because it doesn't do something I would have preferred, but that's what would have worked for me more. But I know that that doesn't mean that the way they did it is bad. Obviously, the way they did it is perfectly fine too. They kind of make up for it in the later scene in the arc where Shadow remembers it and then uses that to power the Eclipse Cannon. And I thought that was a really great scene. All of that rage, that pure hate that is driving this chaos. I love the sort of combination of the negative raw emotion that Shadow has, but also the literal negative chaos energy he's creating to power the Eclipse Cannon. I think that is really cool, that there's two forms of negative energy that are happening there that combine together to make that scene really have just so much more weight to it than if he just powered it up, you know, without any build-up. Like the fact he had to dig deep for a moment to really like get himself driven, you know, and just go, you know, and how vicious it was, that the way he was running, it was just like, wow. They really captured the emotion of the character in that scene. And I think Keanu Reeves was just like, man, I was right when I initially said I wanted him, because man, this has got to be one of my favorite performances from him. Like he really just stole the show in this one, and I cannot wait to see more of his character in this universe. It gives me hope that, like, oh, so like the more characters they add, the more interesting this universe becomes. It's not like the opposite, where it's like, I mean, I'm sure there could be too many if they go too crazy with it, but like, I like the way they're doing this. You know, we introduce a couple new characters, we focus on them, and we introduce a couple more, we focus on them. You know, like, that is a really good method. How they handled his death at the end, or like his supposed death, was fine. I kind of feel like I had this moment where I was watching and I was like, wait, where did Shadow go? What happened to Shadow? Are they going to cut back? Like, what happened? Are we going to get... And they just didn't really cut back. And then we did get that, like, end credit scene where he's alive. I don't know if he has his memory, but I mean, I hope he does. I hope he didn't hit his head too hard. I guess we'll find out in the next movie if he's like, who are you? You know? But, I don't think that's going to happen. And then obviously the reveal, I might as well just cover this now, of Amy being at the end of the movie and Metal Sonic being there. I didn't like the multiple Metal Sonics, I'll say that much. I didn't like that there were multiple of them. I liked how accurate it looked, and you know, I wanted to mention something that was funny with Metal Sonic is that he looks the same no matter what universe he's in. In the Boom universe, he looked the same. Even from the classic to the modern design, he looks the same. And now, again, he looks the same. It's like, you can throw this guy in any universe, his design is so iconic and so good that they just don't touch it, and I think that's really funny. Yeah, looks amazing, but I don't understand, like, are they characters that are from the future? Is Silver still somehow connected to this? Are maybe Silver and Amy, like, both from the future and they're both friends? Like, are they doing a Little Planet thing? Like, what is this? Like, is it CD related or is this Heroes related? Is it a mix of both plot lines? Like, is this something completely original? I have no idea. I was really hoping and thinking it was going to be Silver, but the fact that it wasn't, I was like, oh, okay, well, this still works and I think this is great too. But, where's Silver? Like, now I'm just wondering, like, oh, maybe they really are gonna save like the '06 storyline for like a later, maybe one of the last stories, you know, to really make a really good ending for the, I can't say trilogy, but for the movie universe. So, I mean, my thoughts on that is that I love the way the characters look, both Metal and Amy, and I think they both deserve the spotlight, and I'm sure they have a really interesting story to tell for 4, otherwise they wouldn't have set it up like this. They're really setting it up right now. They're not holding back. They're literally showing us who the next villain is and who the next person they're introducing is. So yeah, I think overall this movie was fantastic. And I do want to make more videos on it that are more in depth. This is just sort of my like discussion review where I just sort of spill out my thoughts after seeing it just one time. I'm probably going to go see it again and then do my full review because I think I need a second viewing before I can really know for certain where this movie stands with me. But I definitely felt mixed coming out of the theater. I still have this issue with these movies, same issue I had with the Knuckles show and with both the movies, is that I'm like, I know they're trying, like the issue with a lot of movies these days actually is that they're trying to appeal to so many different types of people, so many audiences. The writing just sometimes for me is very inconsistent, and I just can't help but feel that if they just removed that stuff and just allowed the scenes to be funny in different ways, like they just changed the style of the way they write and just use less gimmicky jokes, give the humans a little bit more to do, but don't make them feel a little bit too goofy because that just ruins the tension of the scene. When Tom and Maddie are breaking into Gun, his character isn't useless, he is a cop, you know what I mean? Like, he actually helped Sonic defeat Eggman in the first movie, like he should be able to do something useful, but instead, like they're mentally off in another realm, just having a blast, like they're on vacation or something, when they're really doing something incredibly dangerous. And I know that's part of their character, but I don't know, just there was something about it. There's something about their characters that I just was not on board with this film. That just didn't do it for me with this film. But they were not terrible. It's just the movie for me has a lot of speed bumps. It's like, oh, we're going fast, we're having fun. And it's just like, whoa, what was that? That was unnecessary. And it's just, that's how I feel about them. And it's hard to shake that. Even when I like accept this universe for what it is and what these movies are for what they are and like what they're trying to do, you know, obviously appealing to a much younger audience. But at the same time, they're also like targeting the adult audience too, by putting this more mature themes in there, but they're buried in there, you know? And I'm like, man, the potential, you know, of some of these types of stories to like be fully realized. And I don't mean that it has to be unnecessarily dark, but like to just be fully realized, but be balanced and not be this gimmicky Hollywood machine trying to make everyone laugh at Green Lantern again. It's just, you know, a lot of my issues were with like the joke writing, but the actual dialogue itself and the writing and the way like the characters are developed in this story, I really enjoy. And I love the dynamic between Sonic and Shadow and how they've both seemingly at one point in the story have lost something. You know, as far as Sonic knows, Tom could be dead, so like, or may never be the same again. You know, getting punched in the gut by the ultimate life form might do that to you. I liked the movie a lot, but I have to agree with some of the things people are saying, like gun mechs being like the final battle was pretty underwhelming. And I guess that's just what this movie universe is just like a much more underwhelming version of what the actual series is. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that almost like it's much more grounded. You know, like the Space Colony arc isn't the size of like a state. It's the size of, well, I mean, just efficiently what it needs to be. It's a little room and Shadow powers the Eclipse Cannon, and that's all it is. Like, it's a very small place. And then the Bio Lizard is just completely removed. A lot of elements are just completely removed. And again, not to directly compare it to SA2, but it's kind of hard not to, because that's what it's pulling from. And I just noticed these things and I'm like, I didn't expect Bio Lizard to be there, but maybe it should have been. Maybe something, like I don't know, something more climactic should have been there, because that was strange to me. But I did like how we got a really cool Sonic versus Shadow fight, where we got to see them fight in their super forms on the silver screen. I was freaking out. I mean, the whole, like, from when they started fighting to when they went super to when they zoom around the world and then they go up to the Ark and then Shadow gets punched into the moon. And it honestly reminded me of my show a little bit. I was like, oh my god, like seeing like the idea of a super powered fight, like getting taken from the Earth to the moon, you know, that was in my first episode of Doomsday. So it was really cool to see that. I felt like this movie has such Dragon Ball DNA, and I don't know why. Like, I know that's always been a part of Sonic, even officially, let alone from the fandom. I do think that that's the direction that the franchise seems to be going in, especially with Shadow Generations as well. They're leaning into more shonen elements, and I think the fact that this movie did was like, whoa, you know, like that is really, really neat. And we should have got that Sonic and Knuckles fight also. I know everyone's been saying that, and I 100% agree that even if it was just like a minute long, we should have just seen them fight just for a minute, you know? Who cares? Add 1 minute to the film. They just built up so much badass tension there, and it would have been cool to see Knuckles actually like fight for what he believes in and not just be so gullible with everyone and trusting of everyone, you know, for him to have like a firm stance, like, well, this is what, like, it's a part of what's in his culture, you know, and it's a very powerful thing, and he's trying to treat it responsibly, and Sonic is being completely irresponsible with it. So that was really interesting. I think overall, like, that is the movie. That is how they would adapt the SA2 storyline. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, yep, that's exactly what they would do. You know, they would heavily change a lot of elements and make a lot of scenes into jokes that probably shouldn't be. That's what this is. But I think this movie is the best one of the three. I think I can say that. The third one, I could see myself coming back and rewatching it the most of all three of them, because I haven't gone back to rewatch one or two in a little while. And so I probably should have, like, but I didn't think to. But yeah, I think overall, it's a fantastic movie. It has its flaws. It has things that I personally don't like, but overall, I'm extremely happy with it. For the minor nitpicks and for the few story changes I would make and just dissatisfactions with some of the comedic writing, it's a very good movie. And it actually has a lot of heart. It has a lot of emotion. And you can say the same thing about Shadow Generations and The Dark Beginnings and all the other things we got this year. Shadow's character has a lot of heart, you know, and I think at the end of the day, that's why it strikes a chord, and I think that's why it stands out. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, it's night and day, because all the characters had development this time around, like, pretty equally. Like, even Tails and Knuckles, like, helping Sonic to realize that, like, hey man, you don't have to do everything alone. I know we just became a team, but, like, we're a team, so let's act like a team. Let's take care of each other. And to see this, like, brotherly bond form between Sonic and Knuckles is also really good. That they're able to stand up to each other and tell each other what they need to hear, but at their core, they have a lot of respect for each other, and now they're friends, and so the bond is just even stronger. And I felt that like that team of characters bond is evolving now going into the fourth film, which is really cool to see, and is a perfect time for the Heroes storyline. I think that's where they're going next, personally, is they're gonna do a Heroes CD mix in terms of like stealing elements from it, not a straight up mix of those two stories put together. Obviously, I think that's what I see that they like to do. You know, they do a little bit of their own thing, and then they take the elements of whatever games they can, that they're allowed to, I guess, and remix them. That's what I really see these movies as. It's like a little remix in 8K Ultra HD. Seeing every quill, and it's great. I love it. With that being said, what a really great way to start off this year. The movie definitely inspired me. I think it also inspired how I'm going to be voicing Shadow going forward. I wanted to make a few tweaks and changes because I don't know, I think I sometimes get so stuck down here, but there's also up here, I could give him a little bit more of a voice. And you know, like maybe would that sound more human and relatable? So I'm sort of on the fence. Like I wanna keep the moments where he's talking low, but I also wanna give him something else, you know? Let me know what you guys think of that. But that's something that I wanna add to Shadow's voice moving forward. It's just a little bit more of a little touch of Reeves in there. I'm not gonna lie, like I took a lot of inspiration from his performance, that he uses more of his own voice, so I kinda wanna do the same. Ending on a very good creative note. Before this goes on far too long, I could really go on and on. I'm sure there's things I forgot to mention. We'll discuss more in the comments below. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought. I haven't gotten to see your guys' thoughts yet on the film, so I'm excited to see how you guys received it. Because I received it well, but I had my issues with it. But overall, like, it was really good, and I would definitely see it again, and I would definitely recommend it. I'll see you in the next video, creators. Peace out.